This video is dedicated to the very first member of my channel, Harry Elizard. So thank you so much for showing your support, and to show my appreciation, I've decided to fulfill your request and make the Ruby Amethyst locations video, so this one is dedicated to you. With the introduction of locations in Into the Inklands, Ruby Amethyst has basically been able to reimagine itself with a new identity, and what you see on screen here is my variation of Ruby Amethyst locations. In my opinion, this is the strongest variation of Ruby Amethyst right now, and it does beat out the version from Rise of the Floodborn, which was more of a control heavy and even mid-range aggro kind of build. You'll notice right away that there is no real higher top end with only one Ursula now and 0 Mini Surfer. And the reason for that is because you don't necessarily need Mini Surfer to win the mirror match, even though I don't think that mirror matches with Ruby Amethyst will be all that common in this new meta, because I think that Emerald variations are stronger decks. But that being said, this deck is nothing to kind of brush off. It is a very strong deck and it will have a place in the meta. But the reason that Mini Surfer, in my opinion, isn't needed as much anymore is because with the introduction of RLS Legacy, which we play 3 copies of, and your excessive amount of draw thanks to the Amethyst cards, which we'll get into in just a moment, you're likely to see a Jim Hawkins and or an RLS Legacy at some point, and the Legacy will grant any character there evasive. So that means your Mimfoxes, your Mauis, and anything else will have evasive to either take out opposing evasive threats or just protect themselves against being challenged unless the opponent has evasives as well. So this card provides a lot of dynamism to the deck, and it basically replaces the whole Peter Pan Shadow and Minnie Mouse combination that you needed to play in the previous set, which was a bit of an adaptation to the meta, but also just having more questing pressure on board with the Peter Pan Shadow. You don't necessarily need that this time around. In addition to that, speaking of questing power, locations are insanely powerful for the sheer fact that there are very limited number of things that can actually interact with them. Your opponent basically has to challenge into it in order to take them out. And when you're putting threats on board that are questing, your opponent has to decide, do I take out the location, which is generating passive lore, in this case 2 lore for each the RLS Legacy and the Queen's Castle, which is very, very strong, or do I deal with their characters on board? Now keep in mind, pairing with the Ruby package, you have a lot of removal. You have Prince Erics that have been teched into this deck. You still play Maui. You're now playing Madame Medusa, which I'll get into the reasons why in just a moment, because that card is definitely an MVP in my opinion. And you'll notice that we've cut down on the Be Prepared's down to 3, and again, I'll try to explain that in a little bit. Now, before I go any further, if you've made it this far in the video, let me know if you would prefer a much deeper dive on this deck list, because I could talk a lot about the mechanics and the way that this deck should be playing and why certain card choices are made. But I'm going to opt to omit most of that for now, just so that you can kind of get a feel for the general framework of the deck. So starting off in the 1-drop slot, we're opting to play 3 of the Rafiki here. The 3-2 strength that this, the 3 strength that this gets on challenging is actually relevant to take out a lot of meta relevant threats, mainly the new Ursula Singer, and having this 1-drop on board is definitely better than an Olaf. And we still play 4 Minnie Mouse. Still playing 4 Cuscos and 4 Snake, 4 Fox, and 4 Maleficent now instead of the 3 that we were playing in Rise of the Floodborn. I've opted for 2 Crab instead of 2 Maui's Fishhook. I just think the body and being able to bounce it and ink it later is also very good, or just replay it for the boost. Crab is very nice to help you deal with opposing locations as well. 4 Goat still and only 3 Rabbit, because your main source of draw will actually come from the Queen's Castle, I think, from my testing at least. 2 Prince Erics. This card is good, but it's uninkable, so you don't want to get too high on the Erics and the Rabbits. And in testing, Eric is good, but like I think Madame Medusa is just better. 4 Jim Hawkins for the reasons I explained earlier, because it combos very nicely with your locations, obviously. 4 Maui still. At worst, it's ink. At best, it's a 6 body that will likely take out a location for you or another character. And the Madame Medusa at 2. This card is relevant because a lot of the 3 strength meta relevant threats, mainly in Robin Hood, Champion of Sherwood, and Beast Tragic Hero, instantly get banished when Madame Medusa hits the field. Not to mention it deals with the next thing we're going to talk about in Ursula as well. The reason I've teched in 1 Ursula is because when you eventually draw into this, and given all the card draw you have in Amethyst, you likely will, if this card goes unanswered for 1 turn when you have location set up, you are likely winning the game the next turn. That's how powerful this setup can be. because if you have 2 locations in play, that's 4 lore, and then the Ursula quest for 3, that's 7 lore in 1 turn. Not to mention, you know, if you have goats, if you have other things on board that will quest, like, it is an extremely powerful combination. You could opt to play more Ursula, but in this build I'm only playing 1. You'll notice that there's an omission of Teeth and Ambitions, and the reason for that is because you just don't want to play too heavily into the new Ursula Deceiver, the 2-drop that rips a song from your hand. And so for the most part, the friends on the other side, unless we see it later on in the game, is mostly going to be ink early on. And then we only need 3 Be Prepareds because this deck focuses more on questing and getting lore with locations, which is actually super relevant. So let's go ahead and jump into some matches and you'll see how the deck will perform. Alright, in this first matchup, we're going second against Emerald Steel. And in my opinion, this might be the best deck of the format, at least right now. I mean, we're still very early on, but this color pairing, as I've already made a video on it, is proving to be very, very formidable. Now, we mulligan away most of our higher cost things, and we're aiming to play as low to the ground as possible. Our game plan here is try to establish a little bit of board control with our Madam Mim cards and get out our locations early. The opponent, being on Emerald Steel, is likely going to be setting up for an Ursula, Deceiver of all. Speaking of which, there's Ursula regular Deceiver, which will rip a song from our hand, and this is exactly what I was talking about in the deck list portion, where this card is going to be everywhere. Emerald combinations are going to be rampant throughout the meta, and the less songs you play to play into this, the better your deck will be. That being said, if your deck does need to play songs, then you shouldn't necessarily cut them out just for the sake of this, but you can see here this Ursula only gained them hand knowledge. The opponent is going to be on 3 cards after they play this turn, and despite us not having a 1-drop, our board state doesn't look that bad because with the crab that we have in hand, we're going to be able to boost that Cusco and we can crash into the Ursula to take it out. That will prompt the opponent to crash the Robin Hood into the Cusco. Then on turn 4, we can Mim Fox back the crab and gain a 7/3 body on the Fox thanks to the Challenger 3 and take out the Robin Hood. So exactly what plays out, or what's going to play out is exactly what I said here. But the opponent being on low cards here, we were at risk of getting whole new worlded. Thankfully, the opponent didn't have it. So they're going to opt to Robin Hood, take out the Cusco. And that's fine. They'll gain 2 lore, but I will get to draw a card. So the trade isn't necessarily the worst. But this is why I've also said in my Market Watch video, Robin Hood is going to maintain its value and it's going to be a staple card in Steel. Look at how good this card is when you play it on turn 3. It's a Singer 5. It's very hard to deal with early game and it will almost always go 2 for 1 and gain you lore. And then when it's banished, it does this in drawing you a card when challenged. So very, very good card. We're going to opt to establish the Rafiki here for the exact reason I mentioned. Look at it. It deals with the Ursula, whereas if this was an Olaf, it would not, right? So the Rafiki is definitely something that I would consider playing. The opponent once again drops an Ursula, trying to rip out that Be Prepared or Friends on the other side that they likely know we're playing, because every Ruby Amethyst deck plays that, but thankfully we don't have it. And if we didn't have a Be Prepared, because we can't ink that, we would ink the Friends on the other side, because we want to not play into that Ursula, right? We don't necessarily need the card draw from Friends. It's a nice draw off the top. You can see me inking it here, for example, even though the opponent's already gone through 2 Deceivers. I'm more worried, not worried, but I'm more focused on establishing my Queen's Castle. Anyways, the opponent here drops a Chief Bogo, and I'm just like, I'm still like, wow, like I just have to play around a whole new world here. I don't want to overextend and draw too many cards necessarily. And I did consider talking a little bit about the Merlin Mim packages with the locations, because they seem kind of counterintuitive. Why would you bounce cards after moving them to a location, right? It kind of defeats the purpose. But it does seem to work. You do have to have a little bit of an advanced knowledge into how to play that strategy. But there could be a case to be made that you want to separate those packages out, but I won't go into it in this video. In this instance, you see me drop the Madam Medusa to deal with the Chief Bogo, because I anticipate the opponent is going to drop a Tinkerbell. And so for that reason, I should not have quested with the Rafiki here, because now it's just an easy takeout for the opponent's Ursula there, but that's fine. But yeah, the Chief Bogo would have dealt another 1 damage to everything, and I guess in the hindsight, it wouldn't matter too much, but if the opponent had more removal, they could easily clear our board. So I'm going to continue to play around the Be Prepared to the best of my ability, but if the opponent doesn't have it, my follow-up play is going to be really strong, because I'm going to draw 3 cards, because they cannot deal with this location unless they have like Along Came Zeus and took it out with the Tinkerbell as well. But the be prepared on the following turn here into the Ursula the next turn is going to essentially clutch the game out for me. So here's the draw 3, and you get this off, it's basically GG's at this point. We're going to drop the be prepared, and I value the Maui more here than the card draw off of Friends, because I have the Queen's Castle established. Look at the lore difference, right? When the opponent was on the play and had control of tempo, the location is catching me up in the lore. Now I'm going to drop the Ursula, seeing the opponent only on one card. The Ursula here is likely going to go unanswered. I'm going to be able to move it to the Queen's Castle. I'm going to draw 2 next turn, plus quest for 3, and gain 2 lore off of this location. I have a Jim Hawkins, which means in my draw 2 next turn, if I am able to get a location, which there it is, the RLS Legacy, this Jim Hawkins is going to dump 4 lore on board in, 2 questing power in and of itself, plus the 2 lore passively from the RLS Legacy. And I have the choice, do I want card draw or do I want evasive to quest with, right? The setup here is absolutely mind-bogglingly strong here, right? So there you go, the setup is complete. Now I can opt to ink the Minnie Mouse and play the Maui, and go in with the Maui into the Captain Hook. Yes, the opponent is going to draw 2 off Beast Tragic Hero, but that's totally fine, because next turn we're going to gain 4 lore off of these locations, and then the Jim Hawkins or the Ursula will quest for game. There's almost nothing the opponent can do to deal with both the locations and my characters on board, and so this game is pretty much wrapped up. But there's one more important interaction that I want to show you here, because we're about to draw into a very important card, because as you can see here, all of the opponent's characters are 3 and X bodies, and this is where the Madame Medusa is very clutch, because you can take out Beast Tragic Hero or Robin Hood's with it. But yeah, the opponent kind of knows it's over, and they're going to end up scooping it up here. So that first game is a GG. In this next matchup, we're going up against an updated Ruby Sapphire deck, which was all the rage at the start of Rise of the Floodborn, and we'll see what adaptations our opponent has made to make this deck more competitive or more into the meta with the new Into the Inkland cards. Now, going second once again is unfortunate, but it's totally fine, because at least we have a 1-drop, and the turn 1 mini, turn 2 snake is still a viable line for Ruby Amethyst with the Into the Inkland cards. It's a little less strong now than it was in Rise of the Floodborn, because you don't necessarily want to lose that tempo. But against these slower decks like Ruby Sapphire, it is definitely something that you can afford to do. Even against faster decks, like, it's still a strong play, because Mim Snake is still very good at a 3/3 for 2 body. But the opponent is going to opt to ramp heavily here in singing 1 jump ahead and inking the Queen, and then establishing a Mickey. And I'm just like, well, you're not on steel, so you're definitely not playing a whole new world. They obviously have a Hiram in hand, so they don't care about the Snoy, but this is just a free takeout for me, and we're going to be able to pass our turn after keeping our hand healthy. Not having to worry about playing around a whole new world is actually very nice, but of course with the opponent on Ruby, we do have to worry about the Be Prepared, but that's totally fine. And this is why Ruby Amethyst was so dominant over Ruby Sapphire in the Rise of the Floodborn meta. It's because you had the Merlin and Mim packages, which would bounce stuff up, so you could quest, bounce things back to your hand to protect it, so you would play around the Ruby Sapphire's removal, like the Hades, the Maleficent Dragons, and the Be Prepareds. Now, we're going to continue to ink our goats, because we are running low on inkables, and we actually value establishing the Queen's Castle here. And the Hiram engine, while it was amazing when it first came out, you can just see how, I don't want to say it's not bad, but just like how outclassed it is by the Queen's Castle. This card is, in my opinion, a very nice addition to Ruby Amethyst, and it seems like each set that has come out from the first chapter, Rise of the Floodborn, Into the Inklands, Amethyst has gotten a stronger and stronger draw engine in each iteration of that set. Now, don't get me wrong, the Merlin Mim package is still very strong, but I just think when you establish that Queen's Castle, because it gains you passive lore, and your opponent has to really decide, do I take out the location or the characters? Both of them are a threat. Which one is more of a problem? You can see here the location just makes up for the fact that I'm not questing, so it helps you with like the tempo control, because you don't need to worry about keeping up with the lore count. You can worry about dealing with the opponent's board while still keeping up with the lore count. And this is one of the deficiencies in the mirror match that you would face. I remember I had a competitive tournament and I lost against 2 Ruby Amethyst because I lost my die rolls. They won game 1 going first, I won game 2 going first, and then they won game 3 going first. And the simple reason was, they established the mini surfers, and I had to just keep trying to deal with their board, and I just couldn't keep up with the lore. Now in this instance, you can keep up with the lore, and so I think this is a really good design aspect of the game where they're addressing some of the problems that you had in the mirror match. One of the nice things about like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, they're currently running the 2004 time trial event in Master Duel, where going first in that mode doesn't actually matter as much, whereas in Lorcana it really felt like going first was a tremendous advantage, and maybe locations is a way to balance that out. I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. Because you can see here now I'm in the lead here, right? The opponent overextends and I be prepared. I've gained my advantage off of the Queen's Castle drawing me cards, and I'm continuing to gain lore. I was running the risk of it getting Mawied, but if it did get Mawied, I would be totally fine with that because it uses up the opponent's entire turn to play that Maui, and it forces them to deal with the location. So their whole turn is spent dealing with the location, and then I can always reestablish a board and or be prepared to do the follow-up. So we play Jim Hawkins and I just go location heavy, and like I mentioned in the deck list portion, the locations is what will essentially win you the game. The opponent knows they don't have enough firepower on board to deal with this, and look at this, I'm going to gain 6 lore off these locations next turn, and then the opponent can only right now deal with 1 location, and I have characters that I'm able to drop here that's going to gain me a total of 3 lore if they go unanswered. The opponent has 1 card in hand. There's nothing they can do to win this game now. I've locked it up with the locations, and that is the power of Ruby Amethyst locations. Let me know in the comment section if you want to see more gameplay with this deck. I am a Ruby Amethyst player myself. I play many decks, but like this is one of my favorite color pairings because I do like control. But yeah, let me know in the comment section below if you made it this far. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. Let me know if you're playing this deck and what variation or tech cards you are including. Thank you if you made it this far in the video. That is it for now. And I'll be coming with another video outlining more updates to member perks, if that's possible, later on. But thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.